Hi guys. So this is one of the biggest mistakes in all of dog training. It's called poisoning your commands. Are you poisoning your commands? Well, if your dog doesn't come when called, your come command is poisoned. If your dog doesn't listen to his name, the dog's name has been poisoned. If your dog won't sit, the second you say sit, you've poisoned the sit command. How do we poison commands? We do this in a lot of different ways. The main way we do it is we overuse commands. We use commands instead of training commands. So let me explain the difference. To ensure that you don't poison your commands, okay, I'm going to give you the answer to that. But I first want you to understand the difference between using a command, right? Expecting your dog to listen when you need him to listen. Your dog is, way down the yard and you want him to drop into a down position, a lie down. So you say down and he drops down because you needed him to. And when he went to lie down, he listened to you, but he also lost whatever it was he was doing, correct? So that's called using a command. And we need our commands to work when we use them. So, of course, in your life, you're going to have to use your commands. You're going to have to call your dog eventually away from something fun and all of that. That's using a command. Training a command involves setting your training up so that if you are going to do anything, saying your dog's name, to call your dog to come, to sit, to lie down, anything, then you must make sure that what you have to give your dog when he listens is 10 times as exciting as whatever it is he's doing at the time. Hear me out. Whatever you're doing, okay, when you are training a dog, you have to make sure that your reward, whether it's a treat or a toy or a release again to go chase a squirrel, whatever you're doing has to be 10 times better than what the dog is doing at the time. For example, and I know I said it twice and it's a bit pedantic, but for example, if your dog is in the house doing absolutely nothing and you have a handful of chicken, that's called training. Now I can ask my dog. He goes, whoa, you have something better than what I have. I want what you have, right? And then you ask your dog to sit. When he sits, he gets a piece of the chicken. It's more than just about using food, because let's take that same handful of chicken. Let's go outside. Let's wait for your dog to chase a squirrel. Call him to come and give him the chicken. Same response, right? He listened to you. He came but he lost the squirrel. And over time, if you only and always call him away from play, call him away from the squirrel, call him away from the other dog, that's how you poison your commands. So you have to reverse everything around during training and make sure that whatever you're doing is entirely more fun than what he's doing. That's why I like things such as the two-toy tug game. So the two-toy tug game, I'm going to explain in another mistake tutorial, which are the mistakes of what we do when we play tug and what not to do. But in the two-toy tug game, it's teaching your dog that what you have is always better than what he has. And we do that by making the first toy, the toy that we have, come alive, and the one he has in his mouth is dead. In other words, we can create a more exciting toy by running with it and running away and moving away from our dog and hiding. So he actually spits out the toy that he has in order to engage with our toy. That's one of the best ways to teach your dog that what you always have is better. And if he engages with you in tug, it's always more fun to play with the toy that you have. And then eventually all of training becomes what I have is always better than what you have. So you save those rewards, the things your dog likes the very best, and you train your commands 99% of the time. You use your commands 1% of the time. Remember in the beginning of this video, I told you the difference between training a command and using a command, okay? So one of the biggest mistakes in all of dog training is to get a dog home without any training and start using commands. You haven't put enough deposits in the bank account of those commands to earn the right to use them, meaning they're not going to work because you haven't trained the commands, you're using the commands. And then I hear people saying, but what if I need to call my dog? When the time comes where it's life or death and you really need to use your command, it's going to work because you spent the other 99% of the time training your commands. Does that make sense? just think about words and the way you use words. Another way we poison commands. Okay, so this is another way that we poison commands. And it's when we say something and we don't get a response. So imagine your dog is at the level where he knows sit. Okay, I can say, honestly, in my honest opinion, almost every dog knows to sit, how to sit, right? So let's say we're at the point where our dog definitely knows and understands the sit command. If you find yourself saying sit, 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 you've poisoned your command. Saying a command more than once, you are poisoning it. So even if it's your fault and you didn't set up the dog for success, and you say, Charlie, sit, and he goes, not right now. If that happens and your dog blows you off, you need to be prepared to fix it. And fixing it is not about saying sit again, okay? So you need to be sure when you think your dog really knows the command. My dog knows sit. We've spent a lot of time reinforcing sit. We've spent a year giving him a treat for sit. And now when I say sit and he blows me off, what am I going to do to not poison my command? Because sit means sit. It means an instant and an immediate response, not saying sit 5 times or thinking about sitting and maybe sitting slowly. No, it's sit, boom, sit. I call it like sit 1,000 or come 1,000 or down 1,000, which means 1 second, 1,000, 2, 1,000, right? So when you give a command, your dog has 1,000, that phrase to complete the command. So if I say Splitty sit 1,000, she better be sitting, okay? And if she's not sitting, that is up to you and your specific dog what type of corrective measure you want to do. It could be simply taking the collar and like showing the dog to sit. It could be using a leash correction. It could be using take the dog, it didn't sit, so take the dog and lead him into another room and close the door because he chose not to listen. I mean, there's a zillion ways to correct the dog without using positive punishment. So please don't get up in arms about all this, but it's absolutely okay if you're proofing your dog to use positive punishment. You have to decide what kind of a trainer and what kind of a dog owner you want and what kind of a dog you want. So again, if you want your commands to work when push comes to shove, when that, the dog crosses the street, you didn't see him cross the street, now he's on the other side of the street, and you don't want him to come back across because there's cars, you want to be able to say stay, and your dog, boom, freezes on a dime and doesn't move. To get those types of response, your dog has to go through a proofing phase, okay? He also is never allowed to ignore a command or to not complete a command. But you have a responsibility as a pet dog owner to make sure your dog knows and understands the command and that you trained your dog with positive reinforcement until he fully understands the command. You still have treats as a reward, and now you are allowed to go into the proofing phase. The proofing phase is, again, setting your dog up to fail, okay? And that has no place in beginning dog training. It has no place in puppy training. I'm talking about a competitive obedience dog, a Schutzhund dog, a search and rescue dog. You need to make sure you know what your dog is going to do when he sees a deer running full speed and your dog is now running full speed after the deer. Can you say, leave it, and your dog will stop on a dime? Can you do that? I will wager anybody, tell me how much you want to bet, but I can set up a training exercise there is no dog with positive reinforcement only that will stop in the face of the most extreme distraction for that dog. Okay, that takes proofing, and proofing involves correction. So I'm getting into another mistake here, but it's all part of poisoning commands, because if you're screaming, leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it, and meanwhile your dog is still chasing the deer, you just taught your dog that leave it means nothing. Therefore, when you use leave it in order to save his life, it's not going to work. What's the ultimate punishment? Death, getting hit by a car, getting kicked by a horse. So if your leave it doesn't work because you're too scared to punish your dog or use positive punishment, then your dog is never going to be proofed. It's one thing or another. So I don't want to get too controversial here. And look, please ask questions. I'm happy to answer them. I am going to create a special email just for people who have questions so I can address then those questions in a Q&A post. But, you know, in the beginning of training, again, we are not using correction. We are not using positive punishment. We are not even maybe we'll use a little bit of negative punishment, which is reward removal or something like that. But don't get all crazy about, you know, correction, positive. You should be 100% positive reinforcement trainers until your dog is perfect. Until your dog knows sit down, stay, come, heel with perfection. Release command, you know, super, super well-trained dog. If you decide it's for you to go into a competitive sport or like a field like search and rescue or, you know, real Mondio ring or, you know, Schutzhund training, if you decide you want to go further into dog training, you're going to need to proof your dog. It's not for everybody. But I am giving you guys permission that if you want to learn about that, you can go check out my Essential Skills and Games class at inspiredbydogswithdina.com. That's inspiredbydogswithdina.com. I go over very meticulously how to teach a kind and calibrated correction that your dog will understand and respect, but that also will work when you need it to work in the face of severe and extreme distractions. So the reason dogs don't listen when his most extreme distraction is present is because you have poisoned the command. So some little tips. If you decide you don't want to use correction or any sort of proofing, then you have to make sure you never call your dog to come to you unless you can bet me $1 million he will come. Simple as that. So if you're not going to use proofing and you don't want to poison your commands, if you need to get your dog and he's in a distracting environment, but he's safe, right? He's playing in a dog park. Don't use your come command to call your dog to leave the dog park. Just go over, hook him up on the leash, and leave. You don't need to use your come command, right? You should go home and train your come command, okay, so that it's almost like a reflex, like that come command means chicken, you know? But we use our commands way too much, and we use them to bring our dogs away from good, wonderful things. And the problem with that is we poison the commands. And then when we really need them to work, they don't work. So in a systematic training world, which means you are going to systematically train your dog to understand, okay, then you should have a pretty good dog with no distractions. And that's fine and okay for many, many people. But if you're an off-leash hiker, there could be snakes, there could be, you know, anything. A horse trots by, your dog goes to chase the horse. You don't know what's going to happen out there. So I want to pose a question, and it's a really important question. And I actually took a webinar called The Biology of Aggression, and it was by, I want to say Dr. Tim Lewis. I'm forgetting his name now. That's really bad. And it was a fabulous webinar, but he posed a question to many, many people. And I think he went out and did kind of like his own survey, you know, asked 100 dog trainers or something like that. I don't know the number. Don't quote me on it. He said, and I want you to consider this very closely because now I am going to ask you the same question. So Tim Lewis, who's a PhD biology guy, he posed a question, and this is the question that I'm going to ask you now. If you were walking your dog, okay, your perfectly friendly, nice, wonderful dog, and a dog off leash came charging at you and started to viciously attack you and your dog, drawing blood and puncturing, like this vicious dog comes across the street and just starts mauling you, biting you, drawing blood, and your dog, attacking viciously. Would you strike the dog? Would you strike that attacking dog? Answer the question. Picture it in your mind. I'm going to tell you the results that he got. He got a unanimous 100% of people said, absolutely. Absolutely, I would strike that dog. If I had a bat, I'd crush its head. If I had a stick, I'd smack it away. I'd break its neck. I mean, you would defend yourself. This dog's trying to kill you and kill your dog. So most people, I'm not saying all, I'm just saying most people in his little study that he did on his own said absolutely. I would do anything to get that dog to stop attacking. So why wouldn't you then, if you have a dog with a problem or that's not staying, well, the consequence from not staying, learning the stay command properly, is that the dog could be hit by a car, which is like really bad because the dog's going to die, right? So why wouldn't you use correction, not striking or hitting, but proper correction, which is calibrated? Why wouldn't you use that in order to save your dog's life? Because if you don't use that in your proofing phase, then those are the dogs that get hit by cars. Which is kind of like, would you then extend that courtesy to other people if you have an aggressive dog that lunges? Would you use correction on that dog to protect other people's dogs? Well, the answer should be the same. It should be yes, because you already said that if a dog was coming over and attacking you, you would use correction on that dog. You would strike it, right? So now, don't get me wrong here. This is a kind of philosophical discussion, okay? First of all, correction does not involve striking or hitting a dog ever, okay? Ever. But what I'm asking you guys is to think about your poisoning of commands, right? And if you don't want to poison commands, then that means you can only call your dog to come to you or sit or lie down. You can only do those things if you could bet me $1 million that it will work, which probably means for most pet dog owners that you're in the house with no distractions. If you can't bet me $1 million that your dog will come when you call it, then you shouldn't be calling your dog to come. And the higher level the distraction, the less likely your dog is to come when you call it. And the problem is that is dangerous. Your dog can get hit by a car, right? He can get lost. Someone can steal him. He can go attack another dog, whatever he's doing. So it is your responsibility to decide you're just going to be happy with your dog on a leash forever, or you have a dog that listens pretty well with low-level distractions. But when your dog gets around his ultimate highest level distraction or something he's never seen that you can't possibly set up, like a rattlesnake or like a running prey animal that's large, like a horse or a deer running, these things are very, very difficult. And it's mostly the reason people want their dogs trained is to avoid the what if. What if he's running and he's about to cross the street and there's a car coming and there's your dog running and the car is coming? Can you call him to come back? Well, how big's the distraction on the other side? Have you poisoned your commands? So it's a really big discussion, and it opens up a can of worms. I am not saying it all. I have, my Lickety Split is a border collie. She's right here. Never used correction on her, never once. I have also adopted some very severe, behaviorally challenged dogs from shelters that were huge German Shepherds that I couldn't even hold on to the leash. I mean, there was no way. And their background, they had no chance, these dogs. And the only chance they did have was to pay attention right away. And with those dogs, I may have put a prong collar on right away. It's not for every dog. And it's not for the beginning phases of training at all. But you have to decide deep in your heart what you want as a person, what you want from your dog, and be honest with yourself that if you are only going to use 100% positive reinforcement, then, or I should say a positive reinforcement only, which means you cannot use negative reinforcement, negative punishment, or positive punishment. You cannot use, any other thing besides positive reinforcement only. Then you have to decide, are you okay with your dog just for sure is not going to listen in the face of extreme distractions? I'm talking extreme too. Talking extreme. And I want to see it if you have a dog that's been 100% positively trained and you get that dog in a dog park where he's definitely sprinting full speed after something. I mean, I want to see him sprinting full speed after something he loves. And I want to see you recall your dog. So, and if you can do it, bravo, because I literally did it with my border collie, but it's every day, following the rules of what I have is always better than what you have, positive reinforcement and all that. It's very possible with certain breeds. But there are many, many people who don't have a border collie or a super sharp dog, or they're not dog trainers. And they might need a little bit of help because maybe they got a dog from the shelter who already has poisoned commands. So again, we're kind of getting into a big, a can of worms here. The main thing I want you guys to take away today is, are you saying your commands more than once? Are you saying your dog's name more than once? When you want your dog's attention, are you saying, Max, 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 Max? That was 4 times. If you're doing that, you are poisoning your commands. You're poisoning your dog's name. He's going to ignore his name more and more. How are you going to reverse that? You're going to go back and watch mistake 1, mistake 2, which are the hand feeding only and teaching your dog what his name really means, which is just to look at you and to get a piece of chicken. It never means to come away from something. That is how you untrain a command. If come means come away from this, come away from that, I'm going to do something that I want to do and that you probably don't want to do, you're poisoning your command. You've got to stop that right away. There's no, that's it. Now, it's very, very simple. You also have to know your dog. There are a lot of dogs that you can just go, hey, stop, and the dog stops on a dime and comes back. Great. You don't have to do anything other than with your voice. You have to know your dog. You have to be honest with yourself. Did you use positive reinforcement and train your dog to love these commands more than he loves anything else? And then we slowly, in a calibrated way, add the distractions in, maybe use a leash for a little bit of baby proofing, blah, 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 blah. And how far do you want to go with that? But the question, that I ask is really important. That if a dog charged across the street and attacked you and your dog, would you strike it? I've never met a person yet who said no. So there you go. You would do it. You would do it to protect your dog. So how do you protect your dog from getting hit by a car? You don't strike it. You think about possibly using a prong collar or an e-collar or a long line. Something that the dog learns, look, buddy, I'm gonna apply correction because the benefits outweigh the harms. The benefits of adding the correction in are better than the alternative, which is death because he got hit by a car. Okay? So listen to what I'm saying. In no way am I saying strike your dog. I'm just posing a question. So don't use your commands. If you're a positive trainer only, don't use your commands unless you are 100% sure, and you can bet me $1 million that your dog will listen. Every single time you've said something to your dog and you didn't get the exact response, you can't then help him do it with a cookie. That's reinforcement for not listening. The first time you said sit and your dog didn't was the undoing of your dog ever listening to you. But you can reverse that if you stop doing that now. Even if you put a little tab leash on, a little short 6 to 12 inch leash, you can make one. If your dog doesn't sit, you grab that leash and you make it happen. It can be gentle, but you make it happen. You make the dog sit. You already asked him. He already knows sit. He's already been positively reinforced for a year or more. And now you said sit and he didn't sit. He's sniffing the grass. Well, now I would use my leash. Absolutely. Because that moment informs every other moment of your dog's life. That moment where he chose not to sit. And there was hardly a distraction. He was just sniffing the grass. Well, that reflects what he's going to do when he has an extreme distraction. He is not going to listen. So you want to paint that picture right away. You want to tell your dog, what I say gets a response right away. Sit 1,000. Don't poison your commands. Big mistake. I covered a lot of topics here today. I want to tell you guys we're going to go really into depth on these mistakes. A lot of them converge and overlap with each other. So you may watch an earlier mistake and I mentioned poisoning commands or whatever, but today's mistake is about poisoning your commands. Do not make the mistake of poisoning your commands. So even if you don't want to use correction, it's fine. That means you can't use your commands unless you're 100% sure your dog will listen. If you're not 100% sure your dog's going to listen to your command, don't use it. that make sense? Because if he's 50 feet away and you say come and he doesn't, you just ruined your come command. You just poisoned it. You know what I'm saying? But if you set up your training like, okay, your husband's holding the dog by the collar, you're outside, just a little bit of distraction. You run away shaking the squeaky toy. Now call your dog to come. He's focusing and boom, he comes to you. You make it successful. That's training. Don't try to use your commands. Spend more of your time training your commands, setting your dog up for success. Okay? Slowly you can begin to add distraction, but as you add distraction, you have to decide what your proofing mechanism is. A leash, a collar, a prompt, whatever it is. Okay? I'm not here to talk about is it bad, is it good, is it mean, is it blah, because it's not. It's not. And I'm going to do a mistake down the road about one of the biggest mistakes is not to use correction. We're people. We have correction. We have definite consequences for our actions, definite ones. And that's it. That's all I really wanted to say. That's all I really wanted to say. I welcome questions. I welcome, even if you disagree, I welcome the questions. But what I don't want to have on this page are like the haters that are just like, I hate you because you feel differently. We should be able to talk and ask questions, even if you disagree with someone. And I'm happy to have those people and those comments on here. But once it goes to a polarization point where we're screaming and arguing, I won't, respond to that. Because there are plenty of pages that aren't me. And that's where you can go. Happy training. I hope you learned something. And stay tuned. See you tomorrow.